It's about 8:31, so welcome everyone. I'd like to get started. This is part 3 of our webinar on workplace entry. So glad you were able to join us this morning. I'm Spencer Grice with SMEW. I'm going to moderate this discussion. We were just chatting, if you joined a few minutes early, that when we thought about this, we thought we would be on the back end of the pandemic, and obviously we're not. So this is our last installment, but given the way things are going, that maybe we'll get picked up for season 2. So the response has been pretty good. So we're going to go back and look at how things have been going, talk to the panelists. We've got everyone back, kind of lessons learned so far. And since we are not maybe as far along in solving the pandemic, I think we're going to try to look out at what we see in the future, and a little prognostication, since this is our last time out. So really quickly, introducing the panel that we've got with us again. We've got Jenny Johnston with Capital One, Workplace Strategy Manager. Obviously works a lot on workplace culture and future of work. We've got Tamara Van Meter, who's a principal here at SMEW, an interior designer. Really focuses on workplace strategy, but her experience is across a wide swath of program types and project types, so she brings all that experience into workplace strategy. Stephen Jajak, VP with JLL, and really he is the one who's going to help you develop your project from inception all the way through construction. What's the project management for them? We got Lee Harrelson, who's a principal at CMTA. Lee's coming to us from his car today. He closed his sunroof, which kind of made the view a little less pretty, but CMTA is an engineering firm that really focuses on sustainability and wellness strategy. So they've been working on some of the more exciting projects here in Richmond. Chris Duran with DPR Construction. Does business development for them, but has worked in all facets of the construction industry as he's come up. And DPR obviously building some of the more exciting projects here in Richmond. A national firm, so they bring experience and perspective from across the country. And then last, Kim Smith is Senior Director of Workplace Strategy at Knoll. So she's really working with clients to help strategize their workplace goals. So that's the group. Real quick before we get into it, we always try to give a little update. If you haven't been following Virginia in particular on where we are with COVID, the story's a little better in Virginia than a lot of states. We have a bit of a downward trend if you look out across a larger trend line, but we continue to get these spikes like other states. So it's this constant spike, but overall it's a downward trend, which is good. And I think we've just been able to manage this a little better than some others. So a bright spot for us in particular, but nationally and internationally, we are on the move back up. It's not necessarily a positive story. So I want to kick off today and give all the panelists a few minutes to just talk about where they are, the kind of lessons they've absorbed so far over the last 8 months, and just give us a little peek in what their approach is today. So let's start with Jenny with Capital One. I'm going to talk a little bit about employer readiness.
Yeah, thanks, Spencer. Thanks for having me back for this last installment. We've been busy these past couple of months, but for those of you who have not had the opportunity to join previously, Capital One has approximately 50,000 associates with a large corporate office footprint in cities across the country and internationally. So from the very beginning, we've really tried to follow this, the guidance of the medical community. And we have now met or exceeded those guidelines and recommendations throughout our open sites, which are open to essential associates. Recently, we have opened 3 of our buildings to a volunteer population as a pilot. We call it Next Space. And it was important for us to provide a safe and effective place to work for those that are having difficulties potentially working from home, or for whatever reason needed an office environment. And as part of that, we've developed a seat reservation system, it's unassigned, that supports our associates' ability to come into the office. But with the vast majority of associates still working from home, we're taking this time to conduct surveys, leader interviews, and research to really better understand the expectations and what's changed or what needs have changed so that we can really support associates when they come back in. Recent surveys that we have conducted have led to our directional decision that based on that feedback, we anticipate keeping our next space pilot to less than about 5% of our workforce until we're ready to implement our phased approach. But I guess during this time, I'm most excited that we've had a recent shift to virtual amenities. We've newly launched a fitness app that allows associates to stream and download workouts, conduct mindfulness practices, and even have kids exercise videos at the touch of a button at home. And our food service has also transformed to provide delivery and local pickup of family meals, lunches, lunches for adults, lunches for kids, and weekend packages. And I really feel that part of these programs will have a lasting impact to the future of amenities at Capital One.
All right. Next, Tamara Van Meter. We'll talk a little bit about workplace strategy and where we are.
Sure. I think what I thought I would share this morning is a little bit about maybe some lessons learned and things that we're seeing, trends. You know, for the most part, when we were together about 2 months ago, everyone was really trying to prepare for reopening. And for the most part, you know, a lot of companies are still in a holding pattern. They're continuing to work remotely. We're starting to see some lines of business bring people back, you know, under very changed work environments. They've respaced furniture. They've you know, invested in touchless design. So they're certainly making a lot of accommodations to get those employees back safely. But really, we're seeing the majority of the companies that we work with are still in a hybrid telework sort of state, where people are investing heavily is in conference spaces and technology and in places that allow better virtual meetings. And, you know, and that is leading to companies, I think, recognizing that they can successfully support remote working. And so we'll dig into this a little bit more later in this conversation, but there's been a big push on looking at the distributed workplace and challenging, do we need to have that much office space? Do we need to only exist here? Can we support other satellite locations? So people are really doing a lot of strategic thinking right now around how they use real estate and how they want to create what happens next and how they use it. And the last thing that we're seeing is just the slog is wearing on everyone. And, you know, just when you think it couldn't have gotten harder, the kids went back to school and life got really challenging for everyone involved, for parents trying to juggle work with home, for colleagues who now have to alter their schedules because their access to perhaps their mentor or their supervisor is changed. So it really has created quite a ripple. And so I think it's important for employers to be very, very mindful of mental well-being, morale, culture. All of those things are starting to become even more important now than they were when we first had to go remote. There's this sense of we're all in it together, and there was a novelty to it back in March and April that has worn, and people are needing more support right now in different ways.
Well, so Stephen, that transitions to you. I mean, you know, that's what Tamara's seeing on the client on the front end side. Are you seeing that as you implement these projects? What kind of changes are happening?
Yeah, certainly. I think you hit on a lot of key trends that I'm seeing as well. I would say, you know, from a JLL standpoint, we came back in limited capacity in June, and then in full capacity in Richmond in September. and are continuing, other locations throughout the country, which is ongoing. But throughout the pandemic, as Tamara mentioned, I've had a similar experience where at the onset, we were really supporting corporations by focusing on protecting employees and implementing business continuity plans, which then evolved into how do we re-enter space and how do we re-enter rapidly. And I think now organizations are faced with a new set of questions, which is how do we grow and thrive from present day to a workplace that's future fit. And I say that because you hear a lot in the media about we've remained productive remotely, but business isn't about remaining productive. It's about growing and thriving. That's why it is a business. So I think to that end, organizations have a real opportunity to evolve their space and prioritize employee health and well-being. The things that I'm seeing with employee mobility programs, inclusive to design and helping with collaboration through technology, have certainly been critical in preparing for the next generation workspace with the clients that I'm currently working with. And with the rise of remote working and the realization that focused work can take place anywhere and not just in an office, I think that the task now shifts to reimagining how organizations can redesign their spaces for the updated role of the office. I think on our other webinars, I've mentioned that, meeting, exchanging ideas, collaboration with teammates, or training new employees is still central to business and more importantly to tomorrow's workspace. And through design, we're going to hopefully conform to these specific tasks while also still, providing safe environments. The thing that I'm really seeing is the management of these new flexible working modes being critical. So JLL was able to re-enter quickly because we're real estate. We're built to be remote. We have laptops, we have company issued cell phones, and our culture has an emphasis on technology and collaborativeness through some of the virtual amenities that Jenny mentioned to allow us to work out of client sites and not be as connected. But groups that I'm working with now weren't really built for that. So it's looking at the operational side and scaling away from having a desktop and having to be at a desk and having a laptop and being a little bit more mobile. That's where it all starts, is creating the flexibility. No sector, business sector, no business model, no employee are the same. But what I can say is that there are opportunities to really better the work environment right now for employee satisfaction. And, I guess I would close by saying right now, employee expectations have evolved. It's not just the updated role of the office. I think the expectation from us coming into an office has changed, and a healthy office for the users is becoming the new standard, which I, for one, am pretty excited about. And the ability for flexible work environments, it's always been around, but never as heavily adopted as I see it going in the future, which I think it will really lend itself to a better home work balance.
All right, well, it's interestingly, the work you do, you're really on the forefront of a lot of the technologies that people have been looking at, focused on for health in the office. I also know that you, I think, have brought people back to your office, and culturally that was something you needed to do. So talk a little bit about what your clients are doing, what you see as being successful.
Sure. Yeah. Well, thanks, Spencer, for having me back. It's good to be here talking with everyone today. It's been interesting, I guess, to see all this evolve. We have I think we have 15 offices now and 400 engineers, and sort of to see that, the difference in how the different markets are responding to this has been really interesting. some have been taking more of a kind of a wait and see approach. Some have been more willing to dedicate larger budgets to make upgrades to make folks feel safe in the office. But really, I think what's been weighing on everyone's minds is really, what are we missing out on by not being in the office? And so that led us to at least go back in a partial occupancy mode. I think that face-to-face mentoring, the trust building, the culture reinforcement, all of those sorts of things are really important. And, so what we're trying to do is facilitate our clients to make their folks feel safe when they are in a group setting in the office. So I would say most people so far have been focusing on kind of non-capital things that they could do, adjusting HVAC operating schedules, leaving exhaust fans in toilet rooms running 24/7, increasing outside air, increasing filtration to MERV 13 or higher. But I guess, another really interesting thing is that if you look back at the last 7 months and you kind of compare them to the last 5 to 10 years overall, the last 5 to 10 years, we were really talking about the focus of the office worker. There was this macroeconomic shift where we were seeing growth in intellectual assets compared to the physical assets that companies own. And so it became very important to take care of people because, it's all about their cognitive function and what they're able to bring to their job. So there was an occupant health and wellness focus. We were focusing on zero energy and high performance buildings. There was a big focus on building amenities and this flexibility or like kind of agility of the workspace concept was out there. And I just think that since COVID, all of those trends have just been underlined. I mean, we haven't necessarily changed where we were going. It's just increased the importance of those things. Occupant health and wellness has maybe evolved into safety as well as health and wellness. Building amenities and sort of the flexibility has sort of evolved into the changing ways in, how we use the office, I guess. Steve mentioned technology, and I think that emerging role of technology is really interesting because for so long we were designing AV systems to communicate with folks out of the office. And now we're looking at these use modes where people are distanced in their own office, but they are communicating via technology. And so that's been interesting to see kind of how do you adapt huddle rooms, conference rooms, office spaces to be more suitable for kind of inner office but distanced communication. And there's a lot of software apps that allow that to happen. So those are some of the things we've been seeing and I guess trying to kind of help our clients work through.
Okay, thank you. Chris, it makes me think that you are a little different, that you have maybe 5, 6 different really workforces out there under your umbrella and in very different environments.
Yeah.
And those are a lot of very different problems to solve in terms of health and safety and things like that. So talk a little bit about, where you are with DPR and what's current.
Thanks, Spencer. Hope everybody's doing well. And as Spencer mentioned, DPR is a national general contractor. Got about 30 offices across the country, serving 5 core markets: life science, commercial, healthcare, higher ed, and advanced tech. Advanced tech is pretty much our data center and high-tech manufacturing construction. In the past, I've given updates on the Facebook project, but in addition to that, we have the VCU Children's Hospital project that's moving along, as well as several other projects in Central Virginia. Pretty much everybody's back up to full strength in some form or fashion while continuing to adhere to the local, state, and client-driven COVID protocol. But what we've learned during this time, I would say, is that our culture of respect for the individual and change the world created an environment where employees felt empowered They've seen open communication, and we're kind of really a tech curious company that is always considering new ways of doing things. So we rolled into COVID and just kind of adapted and did it with respect for each other, our customers, and our trade partners. One other point is that our culture at DPR really allowed our leadership, from the management committee to the dozens of business unit and project level leaders in DPR, to be vulnerable, to be authentic during the past 7 or 8 months, which has really kept our teams motivated and focused, yet with even more empathy towards each other than we normally have. We really, I think some of the folks on the line have said that they've seen an uptick in activity in the market. And we see that for sure. It's mostly the pent-up demand created over the past 2 quarters in some markets, changing landscape in other markets. So we see 2021 to be a fairly strong year, but what we're trying to get our arms around really is 22 and 23 and what that's going to bring. Thanks, Spencer.
Yeah. Okay, Kim, we were chatting a little bit before we got started. You don't really have the client engagement that you used to have. We've talked a lot about technology on this call, and obviously furniture and technology go hand in hand. So I'm interested to hear what you're focused on to kind of serve this bifurcated workforce.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Good morning. I'm Kimberly Smith. I am the Senior Director of Workplace Strategy in the Research Group for Knoll. We are a constellation of design-driven brands who has been in business since 1938. I like to say we are a progressive design company. And in that, we have a constant curiosity about what's next. And I always say an endless pursuit of the future. What is it that we are being tasked with right now as a team is really understanding these moments and understanding what we think, to Chris's point, is going to be 2022, 2023. So we're looking way beyond this moment of being in a virtual square. And I was saying that live interactions are down, that a lot of our clients in larger cities are not back to the office per se in large numbers, as Jeannie mentioned in the beginning, from a low percentage perspective. We have been having a lot of engagements. They've just been different. They've been They've been Zoom meetings. They've been Teams meetings. I've even gotten invited to Uber conference meeting the other day. So, everyone's in the game of video conferencing. But I think for us, the digital, thinking about the hybrid conversation, everything that you guys have talked about is something we're exploring from a furniture perspective, in what those rooms are going to look like and feel like. How are people going to have an equity amongst them? Connecting people is very different. You get this fear of missing out if you're not in the room where it happened. So that's an important part of all that we are dealing with right now. How do you sort of create an equal engagement when you really have 2 audiences? For us, if we're going to do a showroom tour, it's going to be some people in person, some people digital. How do you take them on the road through a showroom? That's sitting in a conference room is one thing. Like Lee talked about the HVAC, we think about the audio, the visual, all of that, connecting people. But what if you're in motion? That's going to be something that we're sort of exploring and trying to understand. So technology is really pushing. We also, as a company, luckily, before the pandemic hit, invested in an e-commerce business called Fully. So we bought a company quite some time ago, and that just has done enormous business because people are understanding that the pandemic is a little longer. This pandemic pause is stretching, so it's a little longer than people expected. So they're going to, outfit their homes. So there's really an uptick in the residential side of our business. So brands like Holly Hunt that we also own, that's a really high-end residential line. Fully, that's awesome for desks. So we luckily have been sort of that there because we want to meet people where they are, wherever they're working. We'd love to support them with a great ergonomic chair, with a great task lamp, those sorts of things. And one of the biggest things we're seeing and exploring a lot is exterior environments. Thinking about when people go back, what's going to be the purpose of the workplace? Why are people going to go back? Large meetings, they're going to be more about we spaces and coming together in that way. But is there an opportunity to really make a spectacular exterior environment that's part of the portfolio, the real estate portfolio, so they can give people really a power of choice, and they can choose to, if you can work from anywhere, and people have for many months, why not have an opportunity to draw them in with a great exterior environment? So those are some of the things that we've been doing. And the way that we've been collecting this is through peer-to-peer roundtables. Since April, we've conducted many, over 250 people from different companies. So we've heard a lot of voices. We've also been surveying people to really understand what they think the purpose of the workplace is for the future. So that's what we're sort of interested in trying to solve for with people.
As we all are, I think. So what we're going to do this morning, and thank you all for the updates, we're going to just kind of address three big bucket topics and treat this a little bit more of a conversation. But we want to talk about health and wellness. We want to talk about kind of productivity and culture, where we are, and then really talk about how we're using space now, but how we think we're going to be using space in a year from now. So let's start with health and wellness, and I'll start with you, Tamara. You know, everyone who is bringing people back, obviously wellness, safety is the top priority. What are employers doing to bolster mental health? You know, we focus a lot on physical health, touch, masks, things like that, but it's, I think you may have said earlier, this is a slog, and it's starting to wear on people psychologically. Even if you're in the office, I'm in the office every day. It's not the same office that it used to be. So, what are employers doing to address mental health and support employees outside of just the physical?
Well, I think employers are trying to kind of look at this from a few different angles. I think first, you know, whatever line of work you're in, you have work to do each day. And so they're trying to understand, what do you need at home if you are working remotely? What do you need to better support you? And so we're seeing the employee surveys that were so prevalent early on in all of this, that were helping guide more strategy and design decisions. Now those surveys are coming back out again, and the questions are starting to shift. It's more, you know, safety is still important, but a lot of questions around how are you doing? What pain points do you have that we could help with? And some employers, particularly the larger ones, are even starting to look at supporting, whether it is a stipend or an allowance, or starting to think about, do we need to invest in product, you know, task chairs, more comfortable furnishings, things to create a better, more long-term home environment. So part of well-being is, you know, physically, are you comfortable? Mentally, can you focus? How are you doing with multitasking? To be more supportive in that arena, companies are trying to accommodate schedules as much as they can. And so we're hearing everything from, we're working around kind of home care schedules when we're blocking meeting times. And so they're trying to be respectful of what those individuals' core hours are to deal with homeschooling their kids. And they're trying to pivot, and which is extending the workday to maybe some unconventional hours. And frankly, that creates, you know, a different kind of stress. So all of these things they're hopefully short-term workarounds and not really long-term changes. But I think the key takeaway is just keep having those conversations, continually check on people. You know, some of you may have read, there was an article published in Wall Street Journal recently that had some sobering predictions about the potential impact all of this can have, particularly for women in the workplace. And you're starting to see some parents that are perhaps needing to take extra PTO days or extended time off so they can take care of what's going on at home. And the longer that trickles on, it increases the likelihood that some of those individuals may not come back, either short-term or long-term. And so that means it's even more important for you to pay attention to your people now, find out what they need, and find out how to be more supportive.
So I mentioned, you know, maybe Jenny or Chris or even Kim, you want to weigh in on that? I mean, you guys are running big organizations, and obviously mental health is at the forefront, I'm sure, for your employees as well.
Yeah, I can offer that a lot of the things that Tamara mentioned from a mental health perspective is really allowing our associates to take the time that they need or be as flexible as possible. So our HR department came out extremely early on with just more flexible vacation, time off hours, and an extra vacation days as needed. And those were really an opportunity to bolster this aspect of flexibility and really understanding that everybody is in a different place, doing and dealing with different things. And I think, to Tamara's point, they felt like at the time, and I think we were all talking about this at the beginning, we all felt this was going to be a short-term thing. But the longer that we're in this world of COVID, and some of these practices will carry on, and they'll be expected from large companies and even trickling down to smaller companies.
Chris, you've got a real hybrid workforce. I mean, you have some people, obviously you're building something, you've got to show up. So there's not really the option to stay at home and do that virtually. So how do you, some of your workforce can obviously be remote, but how are you dealing with people who have to show up and supporting them?
Yeah, as we discussed, we're in that sector of the economy that, really isn't afforded the flexibility like many companies have. So, we're required to show up. Drywall can't be hung, concrete can't be poured, and wire can't be pulled via Zoom meeting or a Teams meeting. So, as I mentioned in my opening, many of our projects have largely returned to either a full staff. However, we continue to evaluate and implement shift work. And in cases where people can't get their job done for a couple of days remotely, we're still affording our people those opportunities to rotate even 1 week on, 1 week off. Recently had some deadlines to meet at the Children's Hospital, required several weeks of weekend and night work, and the entire team shared that load and took weekend work and night shifts so that no individuals or a team of individuals had to carry that entire load. So it's really been a delicate balancing act for us. And again, it's compelled us to fall back on our culture of just open communication, respect for the individual, and authentic leadership. We're all having real conversations with our teams to ensure that we can stay safe and healthy, keep our projects on time and on budget, and continue to keep our customers well informed. And that's whether it's virtually or in person, because a lot of our customers are still working remotely while we're on site, and we're continuing to keep people informed. So again, we're just continuing to make sure that our folks have a healthy work-life balance, and it's probably more important now more than ever.
Yeah, and some companies like Knoll in August came to all of our associates and said, no Zoom Fridays. So they said it's a rule at Knoll that you're not going to Zoom on Fridays for the month of August, giving it a time, sort of a test. And I'll tell you, it was empowering. As silly as it sounds, I was like, I can't do a Zoom on a Friday. I am not allowed. It's against my company policy. So when a company supports something like that, so some other companies are doing lunchtime. So they're saying no Zoom video calls, whatever you're doing platform-wise, from 12 to 1, and forcing time for people to take for themselves, because it's very easy when you're working from home to work 3 more hours a day. I know you guys probably saw that study that came out, but that's the average. So, it's really important to support people and really force some issues sometimes as much as you can.
Yeah, the boundaries are hard to draw. I see that in my house. I'm sure everyone else does too. And certainly communication, I think, is critically important. It has been to us to try to keep people informed and be open with staff about where we are and what we can do and what we can't do. I mentioned before we leave this topic, Lee, you, again, not so much the mental health, but the physical health. We've talked a lot about interventions that you've been discussing with clients and implementing on some projects. I know that there has been a lot of technology that bubbled up, even old technology that has come back because they have an application to deal with this pandemic. but where do you see those things now, and what things do you think maybe are sticking, going to have some longevity?
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, I guess the way I look at it is if you're in architecture, engineering, design, construction, really what you are is a problem solver. Every day you're solving problems for facilities and the people that are in them. And there's all these tools out there to do that. And it's real easy to want to just throw everything at the problem, but it's not very feasible and it's not very cost effective to do that. So I mentioned earlier that, starting with the kind of what I'll call the low hanging fruit, the operational schedule stuff, ASHRAE recommendations for how to operate your building, which you can find on ASHRAE's website. But then, in the beginning, folks were, I think, flocking to ultraviolet germicidal irradiation, which is a proven technology. It has been around a long time. It's a great technology, and it's used in a lot of different building types. It's used in air handling units. It's used in the room. So there's in-room or upper room UVGI. So that's been a good one, but there's some costs there to implement it, and sometimes there's some physical space requirements that are not met in order to install a UVGI. So we've seen folks looking more at bipolar ionization, needlepoint bipolar ionization. It's a technology that's been around for a long time, and basically it creates these reactive ions that attach to particles and kill them or render them inactive. And that has been something that we've kind of gravitated toward recently. It's a little bit easier to install. There is more data coming out on it, although it certainly doesn't have as much scholarly data as UVGI at this point. But my thought is this, you want to attack the problem at the source. What does UV do for you back at the air handler if somebody's sitting right next to you, coughs on you, and you're to contract COVID just from a local exposure like that? So bipolar puts ions into the air. Those ions get flushed through the building and they can attack the problem at the source. So, you're swimming in a sea of ions basically, and they're attacking this virus. So to me, that has some benefit, even though the test data is still primarily manufacturer provided test data. But it is showing that it can be effective at helping keep the air clean. In addition, it also kind of checks the box of allowing you to have better indoor air quality by removing a lot of other things. And it has odor reduction technology. So I don't want to make a plug only for bipolar, but it's just something that has come up and been a little more prominent in our conversations with clients than UV lately, although both are really good strategies.
You described the bipolar ionization. I think about like almost an immune system for the office, right? Your kind of immune cells do that, go and attack virus inside your body. Mm-hmm. Similar idea, I guess.
Yeah, sort of. If you think about like, if you could just design any system to make everyone healthy, what would you do? You'd put a snorkel on every single person to exhaust anything that they're breathing right out of the building. Obviously, that's not feasible. But this at least allows, the cleaning factor to be at the source because it's in the air floating around. Now, upper room UV allows that too. You're basically irradiating the air that's up in the top of the room to prevent recirculation of dirty air. But yeah, I think that's been an interesting one that's sort of risen to the forefront, and it was already checking a lot of boxes. You can use it with the ASHRAE ventilation rate procedure to actually reduce outside air going into buildings, although right now we're not recommending that. But so it can have those kind of energy efficiency benefits as well.
I was recently visiting a client's building and posted in the lobby. They went through all of the modifications, and one was that they had replaced, they had installed bipolar ionization throughout the facility. And it made me think back of, when LEED first became prevalent, and you'd see the LEED certificate, rating hanging, and it was this badge of honor to show that you were, thoughtful and good stewards of sustainability. And now I think that is going to become the next level of, what you need to communicate to not only visitors in your space, but to your employees, visibly showing them, and communicating what have we done to make this facility safer, because some of those are invisible improvements. Unless someone communicates that to you, you're not aware of the investment and the benefit that's really bringing to the workplace.
I think there's, just as a comment to that, there's a lot of technology that goes into buildings, and every building has a why to it. It has a purpose and how it serves its occupants. And so many of those occupants don't know what all went into that building to make it special. And so we're seeing a lot more of that where people want to really highlight the technology, make it visible, talk about it, because it is pretty remarkable. The things that are going in and the design elements that were thought through at, basically to benefit the occupants.
Mm-hmm.
So trust and transparency has become such an enormous part of all of this well-being for people. And if you're able to share the knowledge through technology, and you have an app for everything. So if you have an app that can tell you about building systems, that would be amazing. If you knew that the air quality is at this certain percentage today or something, people are really wanting that sense of safety. So I think that technology is sort of leading into it, but transparency and sharing all of that is really becoming the bigger picture of all of this.
That's a good segue. We'll hop over to talk about productivity, team culture, and since we're on your box, Kim, there's obviously we've got dispersed workforce, technology. You talked a little bit about furniture. How do you support people who are now out in different locations? How do you bring them back together? Yeah. What are you seeing in the technology and the integration that's going on with clients?
So it's fascinating, the phygital workplaces, the team meetings that we're going to have to connect people in two different audiences, if you will, or two different places or a million different places. We're thinking about flexible furniture and adaptable architecture, because if we've learned nothing from this, is that something so simple as a virus that's invisible can really shift us all sideways in a major way. So what we're learning is that maybe you walk into a large floor plate and there's a sea of open stations, it might be scary to people. So does it make sense to, put in levels of enclosure around those so people have a sense of safety and security better? And in the meeting spaces, from a camera angle perspective, we're looking at furniture and shapes of tops and thinking about that. Also audio, sounds, it's going to sound so different. You mentioned, Spencer, you're back to your office, but it's just not the same because you're not there to capacity. You don't have all the buzz of clients coming in and presentations, all of that happening right now. There's going to be an absence of sound. Sound is good, noise is distracting. So the sound at work is going to have to be reevaluated. So we're doing a lot with a product line that we have called Rockwell Unscripted Creative Wall in looking at that. How is AV getting integrated? We've done that for years with this, with cameras and audio and those sorts of things. You can pretty much do a lot with that adaptable architecture, but how are we going to look at giving people a little bit more autonomy and empowering them to make changes really easily? That's what we're looking at right now.
It makes me feel like, are we going to start piping in sound to the office like they do at the football games now? Am I going to get a cheer when I draw something really spectacular?
I mean, it's not out of the question. Let's just put it that way.
So it sounds like, these are technologies, these are strategies that you're implementing that sound like more permanent redirection. This is not a fix for a year. This is a fix for something that you see as an ongoing reshaping of the office.
We do. We absolutely do. And, it's an interesting thing. We talk about it in terms of phases, a surviving and arriving, which is, we haven't really gotten there yet. This phased reentry is happening in slow trickles, but not really in mass across the country and the world. So we see it, the next is a thriving holistic workplace and what those places and spaces are going to become. Ginny mentioned that at Cap One, they're doing unassigned. That has become a big part of it. Everyone doesn't need a desk all of the time, but they need it when they're at the office meeting with someone. So what's really the ratio? So there's going to be a lot of space utilization data that has to be captured so we understand how people are using space beyond this pandemic. And I'll say one thing I keep saying to people, and it's just, a lot of our work in the research group is observation and seeing people in place and understanding, how they're using their environments. We don't have people in place to see what's really happening yet. And we haven't had them get there to fail. So what's going to happen is they're going to have a miserable hybrid meeting. They're going to go, we need better cameras. We need better sound. We need this, we need better furniture. So that's what's going to happen. There's going to be like a surge once people are sort of back and actually having real hybrid, because we're all sort of on a level playing field at this point.
Similarly, just to a lot of the things that Kim said and Tamara and Steve and Lee, just the trends that we're seeing as like future workplace, they seem to be things that are not new. They've been in the industry for a couple of years, if not 5 or longer, that have just been a slow boil. And, as we look to the future, the post-COVID world, it just seems like we hit the acceleration button. And we're just all in on needing flexible furniture, on needing flexible real estate, on flexible schedules, on, all of the things, the well building and the, how do we incorporate these things into our workplace and really give the experience to the knowledge workers and the associates at large. That's kind of, it brings me comfort, I think, in a way, because we were on our way there.
Exactly.
And,
Yeah, we definitely see exactly the same thing. We say, the 5 trends that are accelerated by COVID are flexible work, the demand for flexible work, whatever that looks like and feels like. And then this emphasis on health, safety, well-being, all of that. And one thing is just this greater uncertainty of business climate. So that's really startling for people. Another is lowering geographic barriers, right? So if you can work from anywhere, are people looking at stretching the geography and having satellite offices somewhere? So there's so much of it. But to your point, Ginny, it's not new, it's accelerated. The technologies are, though, because there's a lot of opportunities for apps. I mean, think about your own life every day and you go, there has to be an app for that. And then you look and there's 3. You're like, where have I been? I have not created this.
Right. I think it's that IoT, how are
Yes.
How are we going to take our cell phones into this new world?
Exactly, with touchless technology that you can control from your telephone. That's really where people want to go for future. So
I think also that just the acknowledgement that with all of this technology, it is a toolkit, but we as the people who have to pick up the tool have to recognize that our process changes, particularly for those of us that are in the design community. It's a deeply collaborative field and process. And that is, candidly, that's taken a hit in all of this. It is, where everyone is working around it, but the speed of innovation, the level of mentorship, all of those things suffer because we've not found our rhythm. So I think some things that we've witnessed and learned personally is the use of all of these virtual tools requires you as a presenter and as a leader with your client to interact with them differently. It's not just one conversation. You probably have to have 4. There is a pre-meeting, there's a presentation, there's a follow-up, because there's an ease in these meetings to become very passive and an audience. And if you were live in a room, you would be much more engaged and verbal. When you're on a virtual call, no one wants to interrupt each other. So things, you're not able to sometimes gather the level of input that you would if you're live. So I think it just requires us all to stand up and, lean in, do things a little differently. Don't just rely on, an app or a tool. It's how you engage with the human on the other side of that screen that is going to make all the difference in how successful I think your project is, or your client experience.
Well, on the flip side of that, there's the heavy emphasis on the technology, but it is deteriorating the company cultures and taking away from the in-person experience. So, if you think about new hires, and there may be companies that are growing now, while there's certainly that are shrinking. I personally know individuals that are starting new jobs at new companies, and it's really hard to wrap your head around the company culture that they're getting, introduced to. I think right now it's understood that this is, the type of work environment that you're in, but it's maybe using the technology and using a lot of the techniques that we've brought up. I think the biggest takeaway from today is that the buzzword is flexibility. So if you think about what that is, it starts from a business at an operational standpoint, providing the ability to work both in an office and out of an office. So if you haven't re-entered, it's thinking about how can you safely re-enter, how can you provide flexibility, and then utilizing the technology to your benefit, but really empowering and allowing folks to re-enter and cultivate creativity, culture, environment, because that business community that we're talking about in the background is very important, not just for productivity but for growth. And right now we are in budget season. All businesses are looking at how they performed in 2020 and trying to understand how they're going to perform in 2021. So now more than ever, that connectivity is important in person.
I do think it's been difficult for us in the design community. The thing about technology and the technology we have now, it's very two-dimensional. I talk, you listen, you talk, I listen. And even with 5, 6 people on the screen, it's not a dynamic conversation that you could replicate for being in a room. And if you're in the design field or some sort of collaborative endeavor, that scrum of people together in a room creates incubation of ideas that the technology just can't replicate. So as an idea of that, thinking about how we're using space and how we might use space differently, I'll throw it back to you, Jenny. How is Capital One looking at their space, looking as people come back? Are they going to rethink how people engage at Capital One and use the space differently? Or is it going to be the same, just more spread out?
Yeah, our work environment survey that we recently got back said that 64% of professionals expect companies to make long-term changes to their office layout as a result of the coronavirus. And, that's really hit home for us because companies are going to need to rise to the occasion and really implement these new practices that help people stay safe. And also the new and varied connections that are being established now as we transition back to the office. So a lot of these things that we have spoken about, we see coming to fruition in a future office, that the mobility and flexibility of furniture, creating more and varied areas of collaboration, really honing in on why people are coming to the office and how people will connect when they get there. And then what will be our new culture or the evolution of our culture when we get there, because right now our culture is very disparate in this world where we're all connecting through technology. So things that are kind of top of mind to us are supporting how are we going to support those associates at home and or the teams who have members at home and in the office? And what does that look like when you think about the culture of that team and building relationships and the connection that those team members really feel to execute in an innovative way? You know, those are also things that are evolving and changing as we all work in this technology Zoom world. But you know, we realize that we're missing the conversations that we all have. We're missing those quick discussions and meetings between. So I think now, as we look to space in the future, we need to be able to support those community moments, those areas where you're coming together in the office, because that's what we're going to need to support. We know that we can get that focus work done in a virtual way. So looking to the office of the future is going to be supporting that community and supporting that culture.
Yeah, Jenny, I think you hit the nail on the head. And I'll go back to my definition of flexibility. You know, I started by saying it's an operational change, and you think about how the staff or employees can operate and work. And the second part, and you hit on this earlier, was the flexibility of the work environment, which is, do you have, I'm in a touchdown office today. So this is an office that we can reserve to use. I'm in a predominantly open plan at JLL. But benching is not a new concept. There have been, you know, a reservation-based system. You guys have communities at Cap One where you can reserve desk space. These are now becoming more prevalent through design with products that businesses already have, and basically changing the way we're looking at it and going in and using flexible workspace, meaning it could be yours one day, it could be someone else's the next day. While there are still folks that have full-time offices and full-time desks, there are certain operations that have that flexibility. So I think that's, you know, really important to keep in mind. The designs that I'm seeing now are more heavily focused on collaborative spaces than ever before. We've seen this increase over the last 5 years with huddle rooms. So, you know, it used to be large conference rooms or workspace. Then we started introducing these mid and smaller collaborative spaces. They're now, you know, I wouldn't call them small, but we're now looking at more collaborative space and maybe less touchdown and work areas. And Kim, I think you hit on remote offices. Certainly large businesses and corporations are looking at potential abilities to consolidate large portfolios, but they're opening smaller remote offices to lend itself better to this new hybrid work environment. And what I'm seeing here in Richmond is a user who would be focused on the city also wants to throw in a suburban site for evaluation, and a real question about, you know, what are the amenities by having a suburban office instead of an urban city office. And the thought process there is being closer to the staff. So we're running geographic studies to understand where all of the staff is housed and living, and where can we, you know, are we looking in Innsbruck, you know, where exactly are we looking to try to target potential suburban office that could lend itself better to a flexible or hybrid work environment. So it goes as far as even the site selection for a new office.
Yeah, I think it's really about meeting people where they are, and the extended geography is really about that, you know, testing markets in different geographies to see where the pool of workers are. It's almost like co-working spaces all over the place, right? It's sort of that mentality, just to support people and understand their comfort level. So that's where we are.
All right. Well, we're really at the end of our hour. So Anybody want to give a last word? They just feel like they didn't get in and need to impart some knowledge.
I would just say there have been some great questions popping up on chat today. So we'll be sure to follow up with each of you that have sent us specific questions, because there's some really good ones.
Yeah, you know, it always seems like an hour's a long time, and then we get to the end, and you know, it's a great discussion this last 15 minutes. And I think a lot of people, having you guys talk about where we are going in the future, obviously everyone wants to know, back to the idea of some certainty, to be able to look out in the landscape and plan on some things. So thank you all for joining us. Thank you for participating. Thank you for all the contributions. For everyone who joined us on the webinar, we will email this out to all the participants, so you can see that. And this is obviously, there's 3 of them, so you can pick up all 3 of those. And just want to say that all the panelists, I think all of their contact information and bios are along with that. You should feel free to reach out to them. They obviously have a lot of great knowledge and insight. So if you've got questions and want to follow up directly, you should feel free to do that. Outside of that, thank you for joining us for the 3 of these. It's been great fun. And we'll see you on another one.
Thanks, Spencer. I hope we get picked up for season 2.
I do too.
Yeah.
Have a great day.
I hope it comes sooner than you get like a season 2 of Ozark, right? 3 years later.
Thanks, Spencer.
Thank you.
Be well.
Have a good week.